Afternoon, everybody. My name is Joe Stoltz. I'm the Director of Leadership Programs at George Washington's Mount Vernon. Thank you all for coming to join us today for this conversation, exploring George Washington's sort of early years in leadership. I'm going to be joined today by Matt Chase. He is the CEO and Executive Director of the National Association of Counties here, just outside of, he's in Washington, D.C., but, Mount Vernon is just outside of it. So Matt, you come on in. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons why we wanted to have you especially on first is because I know in the biography of George Washington, his service to the county, Fairfax County, and his service to county governments gets quite overshadowed at times, and I suspect, and we can sort of dig into this, that sometimes the role of county governments get overlooked even to this day.
Right.
So we're really excited to have you on.
Well, thank you. And George Washington has been an inspiration for our members. We've actually brought our executive leadership staff for the National Association of Counties out to your Leadership Institute. And in January, we had a fabulous day when we brought our county elected officials from across the country out there. And we did it because really we used his farewell address to try and unite our members nationally. The National Association of Counties, 40,000 county elected officials. Some of them are elected surveyors, which Mr. Washington was.
Mm-hmm.
And there still are people elected. And so we thought it was really important to go out there and study President Washington's farewell address and how he warned the country about faction, political party, dangers, and foreign entanglement, which are all front and center today.
Yeah. And so, I guess this might be kind of a weird way to, like a kickoff question, but I think counties are one of those things that most of us, I'm from Louisiana originally, so I didn't actually grow up with counties. I grew up with parishes, but same idea. But what are counties and where do they come from?
Well, counties actually come from England and go back to the year 1000. Everybody knows the story of the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the sheriff was actually the tax collector for the king. Our modern day sheriff are more law enforcement, and they control communities, but they also run their jails. But going back to your intro on COVID and the current landscape, counties are really on the front line. So counties employ 3.6 million Americans. So 1% or more than 1% of Americans are employed by counties or parishes. Counties own over 1,000 hospitals, so we truly are on the front lines of this pandemic. And we run over 1,900 local public health authorities, which are essentially the ground troops for the Center for Disease Control. That's where the real world boots on the ground occur, are at the county public health departments. We even employ what we call the last of the first responders, which are coroners and medical examiners. We actually are processing, unfortunately, 100,000 deceased Americans in this pandemic.
Yeah, it's like I said, Washington is sort of, for very obvious reasons, most famous for being President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Actually, the longest executive or the longest elected role he serves is as the equivalent of a state legislator. But he is intimately involved in the government of the county. He spends most of his time living in Fairfax County, the one that Mount Vernon is, of course, still in today. And so it's interesting, when you were enumerating a number of those things that counties even do to this day, that those are, Washington was helping establish the beginnings of hospitals in Fairfax County, trying to adjudicate the construction of roads within the county. And so it's for a lot of our fans here at Mount Vernon that are, want to know more and more about George Washington, I would definitely recommend they start to look more into his service in Fairfax County and sort of on the local level. I don't think it gets appreciated enough.
Well, and I would say if the country was being founded, roads or in some cases toll pikes or turnpikes, basic infrastructure was so key in the establishment of the country and how we moved west. Today, counties own 45% of all the roads in this country and 4 out of 10 bridges. We also own a third of all airports. So if you're flying into Las Vegas or Pittsburgh or Miami, those are county owned. Even Memphis is a city county owned airport where FedEx flies out of every day. But I think our founding fathers, including George Washington, understood that infrastructure was essential for commerce. The other thing that his leadership was really important in documenting, record keeping, surveying, land records, permits. That's still an essential function of county government. We do it on behalf of the states. And so the fundamental of society hasn't changed over all these years.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Washington was a surveyor, so that interests me because it a lot of Washington's surveys and like his will and stuff like that are still held by the Fairfax County government because they're still used for property disputes to this day. So I mean, what are the challenges for county governments? I assume they're in some sort of historic preservation role just as part of their day-to-day operations.
Yeah, well, we like to explain to folks, even pre-COVID, when we had exceptional economic performance nationally, record unemployment, modest GDP growth, strong wage growth, we still had 800 counties that never recovered from the 2008 recession. So 1 out of every 4 counties actually never recovered. We also were seeing record pressures on our human services, mental health issues, substance abuse, particularly around opiates and heroin, homelessness, housing affordability, returning veterans coming back to the community. And we have seen racial injustice and disparities for a long time that we've dealt with, particularly through the criminal justice system and through the court, unfortunately. But we were already seeing these historic demands. Now with COVID, we have what we would say is kind of a triple threat. You have COVID as a public health pandemic, and while we're reopening the economy, most people have failed to really recognize we've lost over 100,000 Americans. To put that in perspective, it is now the top 7 cause of death in the United States for a year in only 3 months. It passed suicide, it passed traffic accidents, past fatalities from diabetes and kidney failure. It's a real public health issue, and we're seeing spikes. We also have the economic side with 42 million unemployed Americans. By comparison, in 2008, 2010, we had 16 million unemployed Americans of the Great Recession. Today, we have 42. That's important for counties because we provide a social safety net. And now you add in the racial injustice and the immoral killings by a police officer who was sworn to protect and was trained to protect citizens. It's just really overburdened our senses. We're so overwhelmed. Which brings us back to Washington. And when we brought our leaders out, and you were kind enough to lead us through several trainings about the importance of vision and planning and execution, and really looking at Washington's leadership style of how do you manage conflict with a lot of disagreements. You have to go back to your values, you have to go back to your vision. And what we took away from Washington's leadership was to be fundamentally optimistic, to always have a positive outlook. And that's what we were trying to instill in our election and our career people.
Yeah, I mean, you guys, I think, came out 4 times over the sort of winter. Without trying to get you to sort of toot our horn here, I mean, what inspired you to bring your whole team out like that?
Well, I think as a country, we've lost sight of why we were founded and why we were different than the rest of the world. And we tend to take it for granted. The other thing, well, every leader has character flaws, and you can pick at Washington's character flaws all day. He still led with character later in his life. And he really understood the difference between leadership and authority. And we're trying to instill leadership skills into our elected officials who just by their elected position have authority. But we want them to understand there's a difference between getting community buy-in and just forcing the vision down community's throat. And we also remain scared to death at the national level of the increased partisanship of the country. And we know the cycles of it throughout our history. But we wanted to study, do times make great leaders, or do great leaders make the time? And I think Washington is such an interesting study on how the time kind of found him, but he stepped up and he learned from life's earlier failures.
Yeah, I mean, so what you know, we want to get you back again, and we'd love to get more of the, especially the elected officials in. I mean, what have you found, you know, as somebody that's, you know, really familiar with our programming, I think at this point that'd be fair to say, you know, are the things that elected officials could be most learning from somebody like George Washington?
I think one, we will always be back because we think the country needs Mount Vernon and George Washington Leadership Institute, that this partisanship is a disease, and folks are becoming more loyal to their party than to the common good. And so that's an interesting dynamic, really for an organization like ours that represents 40,000 elected officials. But we are blessed at the local level that, while partisanship has taken over nationally, it hasn't totally infected us at the local level, but we see it coming. What we really value about the training and just the conversation was realizing that, well, today's times are tough. We've had tougher times as a country. And going back to what I said earlier, understanding the importance of character and understanding the importance of being a learning organization, as he was as a politician, but also a businessman. And to really how you taught us to think about asking the question why. Because as leaders, we get to how and what. And I think Washington always focused on why. Like the fact that he never thought he was going to defeat the British on the battlefield, he just needed to outlast them. And we see that when we fight wars globally now, that's what other nations and folks do to us. But I think it's really important that you talk about how do you manage conflict, how do you articulate the vision, and most importantly, how do you master execution of your vision? And governments are going to have fewer resources.
Yeah, I mean, it's why do you think that? I mean, you've indicated that you definitely feel like sort of a growing partisanship is coming to the county level. But why do you think that it's taken longer to get there than at other levels of the government? Is it a function of counties sort of deal with such practical day-to-day issues that they're a little not more cut and dry? But
I think there's two factors. One, county governments were designed to check and balance. We have independently elected officials, district attorneys, sheriff, tax collectors, clerks, treasurers, plus a policy board. Versus, say, a state or city where the governor may control the cabinet or a city manager may control a lot of the functions. By design, county officials have to compromise because nobody holds absolute power. They have to collaborate. I think, as you said, the things that we're working on are so practical. And we are totally accountable at the local level. When county elected officials step out of line, the residents know it. They're going to see them in the grocery store. They're going to see them at the baseball game, and they're going to get an earful. Doesn't mean we're perfect, but we are certainly accountable.
Yeah, well, and you I think touched on these elected officials live in the community, like right up in the communities that their constituents are in, but they are elected, and this is an election year. There's been a lot of angst about how the scenes from Georgia last night with Georgia's election, and trying to get voting done in a timely manner. How are counties sort of preparing for the election coming up?
Yeah, the blessing and the curse of our nation's election system is that it's very decentralized. So it actually is an asset that really does provide a lot of checks and balances for security. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing in Georgia is kind of the worst of all things coming together. The state mandated that counties purchase new equipment. We typically rely on volunteers. Counties nationally run about 100,000 poll locations with 700,000 poll workers. The vast majority of the poll workers tend to be elderly, tend to be retired. You have to go through extensive training, and it's quite a commitment. You don't just show up and volunteer in election day. And what has happened with this COVID situation is you had brand new machines, and you had a lot of elderly poll workers say, "I'm not showing up in person." So the county had to rush and bring in people who weren't fully properly trained on the equipment. And in some cases, facilities were so old when they plugged in the voting equipment, which is two pieces. It's a printer and a scanner, two different pieces. It actually overloaded the utility. It blew the fuses. And so there's a lot of finger pointing between the county and the states. The state actually determines how many precincts you'll have and how many polling locations. The state determines the equipment. The county then have to implement based on the state guidance. But it is very unfortunate. It's not acceptable. And we are all, as a country, both state and local, need to get our act together for the fall. What is challenging is it takes months and months and months to plan these elections. And particularly with COVID, it's thrown traditional plans out the door.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember when you came out, if you did I mention the fun fact about, or do you just happen to know what happened to George Washington the first time he ran for office?
I do not.
Yeah, he didn't win his first election, and then the next time he brought more whiskey. So I don't know if that's maybe something Georgia would like to look into, but we'll see. I get sort of one last question, and we'll open it up to questions from the audience. But you mentioned at the start, the counties, get their part of with their root in England, right? The connection of the Sheriff of Nottingham and sheriffs being county positions, right? And so obviously counties are intimately tied up with issues of policing. And watching everything this past week, I get asked a lot, what would Washington think of the government today? And I think a lot of folks that ask that aren't really sort of asking at what level of government would Washington be responding at. But I think one of the things that, and I don't know if he would respond to this in a good or a bad way, but I think the thing that he would respond to the most confused is in some ways policing in the United States, because one of the reasons why Washington was told he couldn't have a large standing army was because it would be a large armed bureaucracy that could have the risk of trampling on civil rights. So I think that's one of the things that he would be just honestly confused by as something that was very different from what he was told he had to operate in. What are counties doing to sort of address these issues, and from the different elected officials you're communicating with, what are you hearing?
Yeah, we have been, as a national association, we've been working on this for many years, and it is not acceptable to have police brutality. There are differences between cities and counties in the space where the cities tend to have their police departments. Places like Fairfax County, the county runs both. The sheriff runs the jail, and the police does more of the community outreach. Regardless, both cities and counties need to do a better job. There are real challenges where, as a society, well, let me step back. There's clearly a racial angle to this, and it has to be dealt with. There is also a second piece that we're now using law enforcement and social work. The vast majority of 911 calls are for mental health and substance abuse, or what we would call nuisance issues, homelessness, for example, where we're asking police to deal with society's issues. And what has happened is, yes, there is a percentage that are responsible for this racial injustice, but the average officer has such anxiety with these calls that they are dealing with folks with bipolar, schizophrenia, with the opiate epidemic. We're seeing heroin and other powerful drugs. It's a scary thing to be a law enforcement officer and have to go to a house not knowing what to expect. And so we've been doing a tremendous amount of training on what we call crisis intervention training. How do you de-escalate? With the racial injustice issues, it's not a training issue, it's a culture issue. These officers are now trained, thoroughly trained. But once they get to their posts, they may be pushed in another direction than what they were trained in. So as an organization, we're totally committed to working through these issues. It's not acceptable. And again, as a society, we're not dealing with mental health. We're not dealing with substance abuse. We're not dealing with economic inequality. We're using the criminal justice system to sort those issues out.
Yeah. Well, I could talk nerdy policy stuff all day with you, because that's what I geek out on. But I want to be fair to our viewers, who I think have some questions. See, Cynthia Miller, in what ways were county governments made to feel included in the new U.S.? What measures, if any, did Washington state governments take to be sure counties were heard at the national level? You want to take that one, or you want me to?
Yeah, well, I'll just say real quick, and I'll turn it over to you. Counties were actually founded in Virginia. The first counties were down in the Williamsburg area, and we joke that our branding problem started in 1634 with the first shire, and the shire are counties, and that 3 or 4 of them were called city county, even though they were only a county government. Jamestown County, for example. And so we've been trying to have our voice heard at the federal level since 1634, even before we had it in the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, I mean, for Cynthia, the Washington, I think in general it probably would have been a function of hoping that the federal government would hear from the counties through the states, early on, which I suspect would be when was NACO formed, Matt?
85 years ago.
Yeah.
And
so I would
likes us to talk to the states.
Yeah, I would suspect, Cynthia, that they weren't being heard that well, and that's probably why Matt's organization became very helpful as an advocate for counties, because there's a whole nother sort of layer of government that they're having to deal with. Okay.
Yeah, counties are not recognized in the U.S. Constitution. We're typically chartered to state constitutions or state law, but we have an incredible number of federal mandates imposed on us that bypass states and come directly from the federal government.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Cynthia again. From the leadership style George Washington imparted at the national level, which of his lessons, if any, transcended to the county level? What do you have for Cynthia, Matt?
Well, what we're learning, again, going back to our time out with you at Mount Vernon, I think Washington's approach to leadership is still so relevant today. That what is our vision as a country? What are our goals? What are we trying to achieve? In my childhood, it was to push democracy around the world. In the 1970s and 80s, we were constantly trying to make the world better through democracy and republic form of government. And we had a vision. And I think Washington also was patient and always picked the right moment for action. And his ability to effectively change and pursue opportunities. And then I think what you really taught us, again, that struck home was his allocation of resources. That as a country, we're always going to have scarce resources and how to use them wisely and creatively. And I think Washington, the fundamentals of his leadership style are spot on today.
Yeah, I mean, I would, Cynthia, actually kind of flip your question around as the answer. I would submit to you that a lot of the leadership style that Washington brought to the national level is what he learned at the local and state level. If you think about your Washington biography, he serves as a colonel in the Virginia Regiment, and then it's after that he becomes a member of the Virginia House of Burgess. And he frankly doesn't do very well at it early on. He's trying to sort of ape the styles that he sees somebody like a Patrick Henry doing. And he can't give the big impassioned speeches that a Patrick Henry can. He doesn't have the formal education to go toe-to-toe in parliamentary debate style with a Patrick Henry. He's already starting to have some oral health issues. And so I think it's at the local and county level where you see Washington starting to move to sort of a quieter, more collaborative process of partnership rather than trying to sort of win over somebody on the issue, or try and not bully them into your position, but just a little softer touch.
So when we're thinking that, there are very different skills that you need as a legislator versus an executive. And he seemed to have much more of that executive style, being decisive and planning and focusing on the execution. Mm-hmm. Whereas legislators are more about collaboration and brainstorming and trading favors, and they're just different skills. Mm-hmm. So I could see why he would thrive more as an executive. Yeah. It's much more aligned with what the general would have to do.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, we're going to pin it there. If anybody has any interest in the leadership program, our website is www.gwleadershipinstitute.org. Go there, check it out, see what we have going on. Normally, we hold all of our programs at the Washington Library, right across the street from the main Mount Vernon estate. Obviously, we are not able to do that at this moment. But if you go to that website, you can just fill out like the contact us link, and we are actually going to be standing up a online summer semester, if you will, for some programs that we'll be putting on throughout the summer. So thank you, Matt. Thank you so much for coming on and helping us kick this off.
It's a great investment.
We love helping you out.
It's great investment. Well worth your time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So much.